often we see students. Sorry, I just got a warning in my ears. And so the murals are a terrific complement to projects and really celebrate the work that happens at schools, which is often happening uh, over time. None of these projects typically happen in one fell swoop, but really they're at their best. One of our creeds is start small and do it well. So you're building year after year on your progress and adjusting to the usage patterns, to the uptake of the teachers and the reactions from the community. This is a great use or a story between two school boards in one city here in Canada where they created a trailer because so often the big planting events were something that happened and the schools needed uh, tools well beyond what they'd have. So what we did was we gathered the school boards and put together this and sponsors and put together a trailer, and those school boards facilities departments offered that they would both store it and then tow it to schools upon request. So it's been a great community resource. Let's just before I continue, let's ask we've got another survey.
Yes, thank you, Cam, and this is fantastic. So, folks, what I would suggest you do here, we didn't, Cam and I wanted to have you rank these rather than just ask which issues are important. And perhaps you could choose the 3 of these 7 choices that are most important to you when thinking about designing or redesigning and programming a school ground. Okay, Cam, take it away.
Just waiting for the slide to come up. This project is, I just want to highlight a couple more from Canada, and then I'm going to move on and show you a little bit of Europe. This is a project that I thought was terrific. I don't have many slides in this about high schools. This is a terrific school from an area about 2.5 hours west of Toronto. This is in Stratford, Ontario. And this is the story of a chef who became a high school teacher who then started gardens and had a really enthusiastic group of students running the gardens who then started cooking, and he ran the cooking program. And what they did was they ended up creating a cafeteria that competed called the Screaming Avocado that is competing and getting about half or 600 of the students a day eating from this student-run cafeteria. I think it's a tremendous story and using all local ingredients in season. So there's a great story of how far these projects can go. Now in Europe, I want to show you a few slides just to show you some of, just to compare and contrast. Here you have in South London in the UK a project called Ravenstone School, entirely paved in advance of their project. School in the center in an island or a sea of pavement. You see here they've taken the approach of creating a linear play structure as one component rather than a clustered one in one location. It actually is changing use patterns. I love how they've taken a small area and just through dividers, platforms, mosaic, and art, created a beautiful little corner for the younger grades with mirrors on the wall, mosaic on the wall. It really feels like a little refuge when really it's built right on the pavement. They've added a sort of a theater in the round, a small amphitheater. You see the inside shot is each member of the student body created a figurine out of clay and fired it based on their readings of theater that they were reading, of plays. And then they've been stored there, and in 7 years, they've been out in the public domain, and none of them have been damaged. It's a terrific story of how engagement can mitigate vandalism. Another interesting story there was, as you probably know, football or soccer is very popular in the UK as it is all throughout Europe. And here we see a project that's been caged. So they made a sort of a fairly dramatic decision to invest in actually a sort of a large fencing, almost a cage for the soccer. But what it afforded was a win-win in the end because the soccer kids loved it because the ball never went as far. But then it afforded quiet areas, relatively quiet areas, and for different uses right beside. You see a pathway that's sort of a meandering pathway with soft surface right adjacent to it. You've got a raised bed pond, you have willow structures, you have these shade shelter with stained glass, and you have fairly extensive food gardens that many of the classes participate in. Lovely project. Moving to Berlin in Germany, I thought this was an interesting project. So I'm going to try a little trick here. You see if I put some arrows on, this is a school in the heart of former East Berlin. And the two arrows there are the two sideways U's, are two schools that are part of the one school. The one on the top is an elementary school, and the one on the bottom focuses on special needs. And then this area right here is the playing field. It's a multi-purpose, soft surface, but man-made soft surface playing field, multi-purpose. And then this area in here is really the sort of a nature playground, or the natural part of the school ground. I think just it's provocative from the lens of how much land is dedicated in that way. I would say, a full quarter of the school landscape, or half of the area outside of the buildings, is dedicated to sort of a nature play and learning. And so I thought I'd give you a look at it inside. So this is a Galilei Grade School, or Galilei Elementary School. So these are in the courtyards of the school. You'll notice very open-ended, soft surface, natural lines, very playful, but open-ended. And so that the schools, each class can walk out onto to these features, which are used regularly, lots of seating, vegetation. These are photographs from throughout the natural area of the school ground. You see amphitheaters, you see channeling for waters that during rain events, it becomes a very animated space. You see a historical feature like the water pumps that were common in Berlin, artistic features, rock climbing with murals cut into them, as well as more conventional things like slides and rope climbing, rope net climbs. So really dynamic. This is in a different school, Neumark in Berlin. And you see gardens, lots of water and sand play. And I love this feature, which I hadn't seen anywhere else, but an old caravan converted to a sort of a dress-up, that stores costumes that kids can go in and do dress-up during recess. Here we are in Norway. You see a very different idea about what you might do on a school ground. No soft surface here or safety surfacing, but moraine rocks piled up, used regularly by the children, very physically able children. There's a lesson here about how when we put a risky environment like this, how children respond physically. They learn to walk over it. When I was there a few summers ago, I was struck. It was in the rain, and kids were all over it. And the North American in me was shuddering with the amount of risk and my nerves. But the elegance of the children in their balance, their coordination, their strength was very apparent. They were used to it, and they developed the skills in part because it was there. This is some other shots of Mango orchards, large gardens, a couple fire pits, lots of outdoor seating for eating, weather station, all these types of things that give a lot of dimension for outdoor learning and support it. Now, moving away from Europe, here in just one shot from the U.S., this is in Berkeley at Malcolm X School, and here you see, I love this in terms of building routines. In the top slide, you see their garden shed, but also you see, it's hard to see because of the slide size, but you've got the Farmers Market Junior stand, and there's a little boy standing there. And this is interesting because this is at lunch recess. No programming, no formal programming at all. But they'd organized it so that the farmer, in this case, is a little boy, and he's got the hose, and he fills the watering can. In order to purchase one, the children had to bring a rock from the garden or weeds from the garden. So it was a way of maintaining the garden by building on a fun routine that children would enjoy. And the bottom shot is their worm composting. So a lovely, it's really worth thinking about creative routines that can help look after the garden, because we're always concerned with how maintenance works. Now, Sue, this is Sue Humphreys, and she is well regarded in this field internationally, and she's was the founding head teacher at the Kuhn School. I just want to spend a moment looking at the Kuhn School. the Coombs has enormous features. It's been developed over 40 years, lots of stonework with a lot of carving into them, sayings, poetry that are relevant to British children and the stories that they're reading. Notably, you walk in the front door of the school, and the first thing you see is all about our school's geology trail, a remarkable connection to the outside. So you see at this school, learning inside and outside is very fluid. At any time, you'd see four classes outside, dealing with numeracy, literacy, poetry chairs, outdoor blackboards. Lots of the preschool time is spent out in when the weather is cooperating, I guess, as it were. See garden sheds and infrastructure, cultural artifacts like boats, slate from old pool tables turned into a wall, and multiple of approximately 7 class-size seating areas all over the site of different shape and character. Gardens, top right, you've got labyrinths, large straw people, and of course there's sheep, all of which has been developed from a very raw site over the last 40 years. Now, there's certainly the benefit of time, but it's actually stood the test of time, which is part of its story. And Stu has many lessons about for us as educators. Like every time there's an event where big machines come to drop off or do work in the school, get the kids out. They're drawn to it. They're going to be looking out the window anyway, but learn about the physics of the machine. Find out where the materials have come from. Learn about the person who's dropping them off. They've focused on having lunch outside and created lovely areas to do that in. And this is a real commitment of the schools to try to have lunch outside. Fresh air encourages activity afterwards. They have things like labyrinths, but I love the lesson of the labyrinth here because this isn't about creating a permanent feature that's sort of just an objet d'art to look at. This is something they recreate, at least 2 of them every year, that combines with storytelling and the story of this labyrinth, and then there's actually the creation of it. So here's one shot, here's another shot of the labyrinths, a couple of the different labyrinths at Coombs. Sue Humphrey spent some time with us here in Canada, just this past fall. And I wanted to just share a couple of things as I move to close of what we learned from her. She brought us into an exploration of birds, and I loved the way she did this, because one of the big lessons from Sue is always bring joy into the learning. Joy and beauty. And one example, there's a few examples in this next slide. So we had to bring goose feathers, and the goose feathers were important for historical reasons because they were the preferred method of quills for quill writing, which is where most of our literature is written. And then, but not only that, a person's quill was a very valued possession, and feather painting was part of it. So the art of feather painting was what we did then to create some of the things we did in the workshop. And we learned about how birds need to have balance in their feathers and how they remove feathers if they lose feathers on one side. So we were balancing feathers to understand how feathers play a role in flight. We worked on drawing, but the idea was that was done in silence, and everything was prepared beautifully, almost like it was an art gallery. I thought that there's lessons in this, and we wanted to learn about hibernation, so we couldn't do that kind of in theory. We had to go outside, and we couldn't do it with just one bag of leaves and sort of a token effort. We had to get 12 bags of leaves, and we had to completely bury the participants in the workshop, and then they carried thermometers, which then were used to measure contrast with the temperature outside, measured by other ends of the group. Hilarious, lots of fun, and memorable learning experiences. So a few references that I thought you might be interested in. The Center for Ecoliteracy is doing some terrific work. One of their most recent publications is Smart by Nature, with 4 core ideas. Nature as our teacher, sustainability as a community practice, real world is the optimal learning environment, and sustainable living is rooted in a deep knowledge of place. These ideas really resonate with our organization. I love the expression sustainability as a community practice. I think this gets us out of our individual world of turning off lights, and it makes us think about how we're acting and organizing in community. Alice Waters, who has been very deeply connected to the Center for Ecological Literacy, as many may know, is a famous American chef. And and she has a great book at the Edible Schoolyard. I won't spend time on this slide, but I encourage you to get the book. It's a great summary of how growing food and preparing food with children on school grounds and all of its benefits and how it can be universally applied. Also a big fan of David Sobel's work and his most recent book, as well as historical books of his, Ecophobia, Place-Based Education, and this one that's featured in large Childhood in Nature, Design Principles for Educators. Really encourage you to pick this up. It's really built on his core analysis of kids on 3 continents and the core ways they play, sort of iconic ways they play. So these are them listed out, the 7 ways, and these have the lovely thing and the elegant thing about this work is that it has implications for both design and for how we teach. One example there on his list is maps and paths. So maps and paths is that children love to decode things, to learn how to navigate. And we've taken that principle in our own work, and we do something called storyteering. And so this is this idea of working with maps, of creating maps with kids, and bearing cultural information, historical information, natural history information about local landscapes, and starting to unpack it. You might be looking at industrial heritage or the evolution of your local river, or the mayor that made a big decision on how parks would be established. All these different things, down to the micro of the stream that might be buried under your school ground. Mapping that, finding out the stories, and making that part of your program. One of the things I'll say as I get towards close here about teacher training is that we've had great success running intensive teacher training in 4 different cities across the country. Intensive in this case is 3 or 4 days of training leading up to the opening of school. And what we've done in these, and the big focus is someone I'd highly recommend you follow up with is Hillary Inwood, who I know is leading one of Great Teacher webinars coming up. A masterful educator who does a great job of combining art and science. And she's done this, and we've encouraged her, and with us she's helped develop a whole approach to how to do this right in your local landscape, literally right outside your door. The products of her work are wonderful, and the teachers have responded incredibly. And it's art, and it's the proximity of the local landscape, and combined with the science that is where the magic is in this work with students. So in closing, the lesson plans that I've got here, we have a number on our website. You can find us at evergreen.ca. We have categorized lesson plans by grade. You can also search by subject. There's lots there. We also have a suite of publications that include how-to guides, case studies, research and policy documents that help you create the case, as well as curriculum-based lesson publications that you may find useful. Almost all of those are available online free as PDFs on our website. I had a piece of video to close, but I don't think we can get that, enable that. But if you're amongst the teachers that are involved in this, I think the benefits are multiple, from inspiring your own teaching to finding increased motivation in your students, better retention in their learning when you're outside, and an actual better performance in the classroom too. So we're seeing a lot of benefits to teacher and a lot of teacher buy-in and engaging in the local landscape on school grounds. So I've been a bit long in the tooth here, but I'll stop there and try to tune into some of the chat and questions that you have. Thank you.
And the next slide, Cam. Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation.
Is there another slide, Tim?
Yes, there's the.
Oh, yes. Oh. Thank you.
And so, folks, this is where we turn it over to you. And you can, if you could take a moment, we're going to leave this slide up. It's not going to disappear in the next 3 minutes. So please type in a question and then press submit. That'll get you a blank screen again, and you can type in another question if you like. And I'll be monitoring the back office of this WIMBA classroom to picking up your questions and forwarding them to Cam. While you're doing that, I just want to mention a couple of things. And your comments about teachers, Cam, were important. We have the largest group of on this webinar tonight are teachers. but only by a narrow margin. The second largest group are those who work with in a variety of other settings, non-formal settings outside of schools. And we have several people who work, who are staff in nonprofit organizations, and lastly, one graduate student and one landscape designer. So someone asked a question earlier in the chat room, Cam, about if there's an article available about the forest classroom. I've seen them in European environmental education magazines. Are you familiar with any yourself?
An article that talks about what they're doing.
Well, that defines what a forest classroom is, and then describes how they're using it.
You know what? Maybe I could follow up on that. I've read articles, but you know what? I don't have one at my fingertips, so I'll have to follow up on that. You know what? The trend is for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is this idea is largely about. In Norway, they talk about this idea of the outdoors in all weather. So these programs are really about having almost the entire program happen outside. It's common you see a number of them in Germany. They're often in suburban areas around Berlin and other cities in Germany. They're in Norway in particular. And in fact, there's now a couple even in close, not quite forest kindergartens, but a lot of focus on being outside. There's a daycare outside of Ottawa that's doing this, and there's a kindergarten in Toronto that's spending almost the majority of its day outside. So this trend is growing, certainly in Canada, even though it's being led in Europe.
Thanks. We've already got a couple of really good questions. The first one is, have you managed to get how have you managed to get administrators and maintenance people to support the changes?
Well, I didn't focus on really an important part of Evergreen's work, which has been our work with school boards. Believe it or not, and I think this may be remarkable for many of you, we have relationships with over 12 school boards in the country, and these aren't just, we call them once in a while, these are formal contractual relationships where the school board has agreed to take this on as a strategic approach of what they're doing and actually deliver services to their schools in support of it. It's a breakthrough in the work, certainly in North America. What facilities people, need to be engaged. That from the local custodial staff at the school to the whatever the body is centrally that you have, whether it's a central facilities team at the school board or your school division, whichever it may be. Often this work at schools has been what I like to call more heart than head. There's been a lot of passion, but not as much sophistication in the design. And so a lot of the facilities departments are defensive because they've had to do a lot of cleanup and it's been expensive. This speaks to doing things slowly, building a relationship, focusing on the bones of your site, like your trees, possibly drainage, things like rock. You can't lift it, you can't burn it. But it adds seating, it adds dimension, it can slow foot traffic, it can define areas. I think starting slow and doing that well is a key part of your strategy. You need to bring them in throughout. The interesting thing is that we found historically in our school boards in Canada, our facilities departments are sort of the most browbeaten, the most defeated, the first to get cut in the budget. And so they're working with increasingly smaller staff numbers. But where we've been successful is when they feel like they're part of a success story. They're part of a new green initiative and agenda that is increasingly at a number of school boards, including one for learning outside and teaching outside and environmental education. And increasingly, the work on the school ground is seen as actually very important work in a suite of environmental initiatives that included energy conservation and waste minimization. And the key thing that's being revealed is it is the primary motivator from the school end. So the facilities team can really be tuned into that and support that, and it's a success story of which in a department that typically doesn't have a lot of success stories. That may be a little highfalutin for some of you, but we've seen it. We're living that in a number of districts. Other questions?
Yeah, Cam, I just want to pass on that before getting to the next question that John Jorgensen very helpfully mentioned that on YouTube there are several videos about Norwegian outdoor classrooms that people may find helpful. The next question is a tough one, admittedly, but it's a good one to ask, which is, can you give me an idea of the cost or the costs involved in transforming an average school ground like the ones you've shown in tonight's presentation?
Well, it spans the range. The truth is most of these projects, certainly in North America, have not been developed with much of a budget. Most of them have developed slowly with, not much more than a few grants and the same old as everything else they're raising money, how other means for like bake sales and ticket sales and so on and so forth, and donations from local businesses. So a lot of these projects the ones that look more developed, have been developed over years. And there's often a lot of smarts in that. Often the smallest committee at your school is in year one. And then when people see or parents see their kids responding to the changes, when teachers see the opportunities for learning, your committee grows, you have the ability to do more. I mean, at the high end, if you were sort of sitting there thinking, how would I really get this to go somewhere? You're probably talking about $500,000. But realistically, I can't think of a project. I can think of maybe one or two projects in all of North America that have had that kind of money when they, and said, okay, let's go and do it. On the other hand, the school ground greening body, Grünmacht School in Berlin, typically has about a $4 million budget each year. And what they do is they invest in about 12 or 13 schools at an average of, these are Canadian dollars, so, or roughly American dollars these days. That's about 400, somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 a school being invested in both design and installation. So, there's one marker, but in my world, typically this is being done anywhere from $2,000 to $20,000 at a stage. And in the rare instance, sort of in a 10 to 20% of the school, they're raising, more like 100 to 150 over time to roll out their projects. But don't let the money intimidate you. The great news is that there's more and more places that are getting grants for this. In Canada, there's a list of them on our website, and you can probably find them from other organizations like our own that exist internationally.
Thanks, Cam. Doris asked the question, and she starts by saying she really appreciated your very good point about starting small and doing it well. And her question is, how do you sustain the passion and interest so that the project becomes a part of the school culture?
It's a great question. I tried to allude to this in a couple things. Sometimes these are the smallest things. And there's brilliance in small details. Like, I love the example of Malcolm X and making the little farmer's market stand and the boys selling, watering cans for water and the kids weeding and taking stones out of the garden as part of the routine. And all of that happening without programming, without an adult guiding them, because it had been woven into the routine. Obviously, part of the longevity is with the teachers. You really need to cultivate teacher engagement, use of the site. You need to work on creating learning environments with them, about experimentation. Interesting thing is that you've got, with gardens in particular, are at once the most terrifying school ground element, and at once, in many ways, the most beneficial, because they demand regular stewardship, regular care. And that's their brilliance and their challenge at the same time. You overcome the challenge. I mean, what we found is that kids adore gardening as a group, by and large, when given the chance, and that becomes part of the daily routine that creates that caring environment for the school ground that you can extend out to. You have Adopt a Tree programs that involve the art project that changes. I love Sue Humphreys and Coombs multiple labyrinths each year. Like it's not about, this isn't just building bricks and mortar and leaving it and you're done. Part of the idea is to create this living landscape that is evolving and changing, and you're growing and changing with it and learning from it and caring for it. So it's sort of a broad answer, but I tried to illustrate it with a few details that maybe gives you each something to think about.
Thanks, Cam. The next question is, just before I get to the next question, I just to remind people, we'll have there's a quick survey after this that I'll invite everybody to stay for a minute to fill out, and two of the people who do fill out the survey will receive a free 1-year digital subscription to Green Teacher. So, but it'll be very helpful. It gives us some feedback about the presentation. The other question that was asked by someone, a practical question, is there a chance to view this presentation again? And the answer is yes. This presentation and all our previous and upcoming webinars are archived, and you can use the same email address or same website address that brought you here tonight to view any of them in their entirety at any time. And feel free to pass on the links to anyone else. They too have to register just to be able to make sure that their computer is compatible, but anyone can view this work, and I know lots of people will be passing on the reference given Cam's wonderful presentation. Cam, another question that was asked was, how do you, I have a question, I'm sure you've got this one lots over the years, but how do you, it's one thing, during the school year to keep the garden in good shape through all the strategies you talked about, but how do you sustain that over the summertime when kids are gone?
It's an important question, and it's one that needs to be addressed in the planning process. The perilous part of the journey is when you overlook these things in the planning and forge ahead with a sense of, just open-ended hope. The planning is key, and at their best, these projects, in a typical scenario, you have 8 weeks in the summer in Canada when school is out, and you can say, all right, I need 8 families and with their kids to take a week each, and you pass the key for the hose, and you so on and so forth, and you each take a week. Often that's as simple as it, at one end of the spectrum. At another end of the spectrum, we've seen extraordinary partnerships develop, where you've got boys and girls clubs, youth clubs, using the school for programming. We've even seen an instance where a daycare in the city of Toronto has started developing more and more sites, almost franchising itself, based on partnerships with schools with good school counts, because these are terrific areas in the summer for their programs and their daycare. So you actually see there's almost a market for well-designed playgrounds for other children's programs. So it's not to be overlooked too, the neighbors. The other big thing is that gardens have a wonderful way of connecting with neighbors as well as all the parent population at a school. So one of the approaches is to have a shared harvest of your garden, and so it's part school garden, part community garden, and the community sort of plays a bigger role during the summer, and then you share the harvest with those that have cultivated the garden over the summer. And in most cities that I know of in North America, most of our large cities, there's a big demand for community gardens. So you probably just need to look around to find people that want to help look after the garden if you share the harvest with them.
Thanks, Cam, and again, on behalf of everyone here, what a fat presentation. I have having hosted now, this being our 5th webinar, I have a pretty good insight into how much work is involved in putting it together, and it certainly shows in this presentation. You've done a wonderful job. Again, folks, if I could have you, and just by the way, I just want to also draw attention before I ask you to start filling out this evaluation, which literally will take a minute and a half at the most. I want to thank Monique as well for her comment, pointing out that a woman named Sarah Knight as in day and night. Sarah Knight has a lot of books and articles on forest classrooms, so thank you for sharing that with us. Oh, sorry, and Monique's connected to me. It actually is K-N-I-G-H-T is her last name. So again, two of you who fill out this survey will receive a one-year digital subscription. If you're already a subscriber and your name is picked, of course, we'll extend your subscription. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and if you can, I'll just start now that you've probably had a chance to rate the presentation. I'll sort of move the scroll up because there's actually a couple of questions here. The odd one here that'll take a moment is, what did you like best about the presentation? And then I'll give you a minute for that. I didn't mention earlier, I didn't report back after all of you told us where you were from, but we had pretty well an even split of Canadians and Americans tonight. We had across the U.S., Oregon to Vermont, in Canada from British Columbia to Ontario, and as I mentioned, a good mix of teachers, non-formal educators, and so forth. So again, thank you for participating in this. And I'll just now move up to the last question. This one's important for us. And it's the fifth question, but be very blunt about your answers on all these questions, because they will help us in reshaping webinars to come, and your honest answers are greatly appreciated. And again, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us amidst a busy, sorry, Kelly, I forgot to mention, I did my survey beforehand. We did have someone from Nova Scotia, and so we had the coast to coast here in Canada. Not quite, yes, we had coast to coast here in the U.S. as well. So thanks again, everybody, and you're welcome to stay on for a moment or two, and if you have any other questions you want to ask in the chat room, feel free to do that. Cam and I are going to hang around for a few minutes. But otherwise, we look forward to hopefully seeing you at the next webinar. And we have one that's next week is actually very related to this topic. I've seen Herb Broda, who's done a lot of work in school ground greening as well, has done a wonderful job done wonderful research around connecting kids to nature. And he has a fascinating presentation that I saw at a conference recently, and I'm excited to have him next Wednesday as the next one. So do check out that presentation if you haven't already registered for it. And Cam, I think we've had everybody has had a chance to ask their questions, and again, I think you just did a fabulous job, and you can see that reflected in the comments in the chat room.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate the comments, and we'll appreciate the feedback, and good luck with your projects wherever you are. Really hope that you can take something and develop a project on a local school near you. All the best.
And Cam, if you could give me a call, I don't know if you've got my number nearby, but actually we'll hang up a moment, give people another minute just to finish filling out the forms, and then we'll hang up. And if you could give me a quick call, I just want to go over a couple of things, that would be great. And again, thank you very, very much.
Great. I will do that, Tim.
Cam, one other thing you need to do before hanging up is just to unlock your lock talk.
Okay.